Hey, good morning, everybody. I am good. Good to see you. All right, I got a brief old movie quiz for you. You ready? Old movie quiz time. We're going to start with James Dickey. James Dickey, when he wanted to reveal the character of the protagonist in his book and movie Deliverance. By the way, he wrote the book Deliverance. He also wrote the screenplay for the movie. And Dickey is one of the finest poets of the 20th century in America, but he's not known for that. He's known for this wonderful story. So when he wants to reveal the character of his protagonist, what did he have? What did he do? Did he have the character A, lose his sight, B, make snow turn into rain, or C, have the character cross a river? Which is it? C. How many of you have seen Deliverance? You know the na-na-na-na-na. Okay, here's another one. When Norman MacLean wanted to write a story about strong inner identity that would transcend the times and the problems of his characters, what did he name his book and movie? Lost in Montana, B, The One That Got Away, which would have been a better title. He didn't ask me, but it really would have been perfect. Or C, which is it? C, A River Runs Through It. That's right, I could give many, many examples, go on and on. These things, all these hundreds of examples we could share show us something very significant. Listen. Crossings through water take on a deeper meaning as a symbol of identity revelation. As you'll see in your notes, inside your bulletin or on the link you've got online, the water crossing symbol, this symbol is called in literature the baptism motif. It's a powerful symbol. We all need to understand this. Passing through water always reveals an identity, specifically the revelation of one's true identity. And this baptism, this crossing through water image, is an important part of understanding literature and history and even current events. It is among the strongest of symbols. Why do you think certain historical events have such long and strong impact? When Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon River in northern Italy, he revealed his real identity. He wasn't just a consul of Rome. He was the emperor of Rome, and in fact, of the world. He was the change agent of the Roman Republic. Think about U.S. history. What was George Washington's most memorable moment? He crossed through what body of water? The Delaware River, right? Now that event changed history. It's very important, but it's remembered greatly because it has a symbolic power that is new to every generation. And that symbolic power comes from the baptism motif. By the way, if you want to understand the lasting power of the Delaware crossing, I highly recommend this book, Washington's Crossing by David Hackett Fisher. It's a great book. But all this brings up the obvious question you're asking in your George Washington voice. He was from Virginia. From whence did people develop the idea that a water crossing is a big deal? Great question. Thank you, George, for asking. Where did the idea originate that the miraculous movement of people through or across water indicates this life-altering identity? It began in the Bible. The most famous use of the baptism motif came when God saved all of life through Noah's ark. Look at Peter's commentary on this. 1 Peter chapter 3. God patiently waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared. In it, a few, that is, 8 people, were saved through water. Baptism, which corresponds to this, now saves you, not as the removal of dirt from the body, but as a pledge of good conscience toward God through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. You see the point? It isn't the water that matters, it's what that baptism represents. Identity revelation. Noah and his family are revealed as people who are saved by a covenant relationship with the patient God. Similarly, Peter says our identity is revealed through baptism. We're shown to be people who are included in the resurrection of Jesus. What's the next most famous Old Testament example of the baptism motif? After Noah's Ark, what's the next most famous one? Yeah, the Red Sea, that's right. Where Moses and Israel cross on dry land through the parted Red Sea. The next one in the Bible is equally awesome, but sadly doesn't get as much credit or as much study, and that is when Joshua takes Israel across the Jordan River. Here's my attempt to capture the significance of that Jordan River baptism. The Red Sea baptism, very important with Moses. That revealed Israel as who they were, a free people. They're no longer slaves, right? But the Jordan River baptism, that shows them as a nation. They are a people now who are a nation. Open your Bible to Joshua chapter 3. Let's read about this. Joshua chapter 3, pick it up in verse 1. Joshua started early the next morning, that means after the spies returned from Jericho, and left the acacia grove with all the Israelites. They went as far as the Jordan and stayed there before crossing. After 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God carried by the Levitical priests, you're to break camp and follow it. But keep a distance of about 1,000 yards between yourselves and the ark. Don't go near it, so that you can see the way to go, for you haven't traveled this way before. Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, because the Lord will do wonders among you tomorrow. Then he said to the priests, carry the Ark of the Covenant and go on ahead of the people. So they carried the Ark of the Covenant and went ahead of them. The Lord spoke to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, so they will know that I'll be with you, just as I was with Moses. Command the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the water, stand in the Jordan. Then Joshua told the Israelites, come closer. Listen to the words of the Lord your God. He said, you know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly dispossess before you the Canaanites, Hethites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites, when the ark of the covenant of the Lord of the whole earth goes ahead of you into the Jordan. Now choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, 1 man for each tribe. Hang on to that. That'll be important in the next chapter. When the feet of the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of the whole earth, come to rest in the Jordan's water, its water will be cut off. The water flowing downstream will stand up in a mass. Stop there. The first 13 verses of this passage primarily concern themselves with what we need to learn about God, about the God of transformation. First, he is the guide. Look up here at my satellite map. The children of Israel are here at the Acacia Grove, Shittim. This text tells us they traveled down to the Jordan River. That's about 8 miles. Would have taken them at least 1 day. And after that, they found out they were going to cross the Jordan River by following what? What are they going to follow, everybody? The ark of God. Now, the ark was to the Hebrews the symbol of God's very presence, his power, his covenant with Israel. It looked something like this. It contained the tablets of Moses' law, among other artifacts of God's relationship with Israel. The ark was to lead. It's a symbol of God himself and his word leading the people. Now, look at verse 4. Don't go near it so that you can see the way to go, for you haven't traveled this way before. Isn't that hauntingly sad? You don't know where to go. You haven't been this way before. Think about this. Let me ask you this. When are you more likely to get sloppy and make a mistake? When you face a brand new novel situation, or when you deal with a scenario that you think you have all figured out, you've done many, many times? Which one is more dangerous for you? Yeah, the one where you think you've got it figured out. The seemingly familiar things in life are often our most problematic. Why is that? Because we think we got this. We have it all figured out. We know what to do, so we forget to let God be our guide. I was talking with a mentor of mine one time, years ago. I was facing a really thorny problem, and I had described the problem to him, and he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I got this. I know exactly what to do. And I said it kind of flippantly, like, yeah, it's no big deal. And he glared at me. And he said, oh, yeah? Who's the wisest person that ever lived? And I said, Solomon. And then he handed me his Bible, and he said, read this. And he turned to 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 7. This is Solomon's great prayer. O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king in place of my father David, yet I'm but a little child. By the way, he was a full-grown man. He was probably the best educated, one of the wealthiest, one of the most powerful people in the world. But he saw himself before God as a child. Look what he says. I do not know how to go out or come in. And then my mentor looked at me and he said, Solomon said that, son. You don't know anything. And you sure don't know anything unless you let God be your guide every single day. Look, I know you are all very sharp. But unless God is our guide, we're not really going to know how to go out or come in. He is the guide. And he's also holy. Look again at verse 5. Verse 5, Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves because the Lord will do wonders among you tomorrow. God is holy. That's why they're called to consecrate themselves, because the God they follow is holy. Exodus chapter 19 tells us about consecration. Consecration is preparing for something special, something holy. It involved three things for the Israelites: sexual abstinence, bathing, and washing one's clothing. So it always took place at an oasis, or in this case, at a river. So that third day that they're camped there, before they cross on the fourth day, the people spend preparing themselves in honor of the holy God. And God's holiness is why the people stay 1,000 yards away from the ark, at least until the priests take up their station in the river, because the ark represents God, and God is holy. Don Madvig captured this with a great succinct comment. I put it in your notes, in fact. He said the people were to be holy because God is holy. The ark is holy. The event itself was holy. You know, in many places, the Bible says something like this. Leviticus 11:44. Read it with me, everybody together. Leviticus 11:44. For I am the Lord your God. So you must consecrate yourselves and be holy, because I am holy. The point isn't that we are holy in the same way God is. Our holiness is responsive. It is imparted to us. It's not intrinsic in us. The point isn't to belittle God's. The point is to consecrate yourself on a regular basis. Clean up your act. Take a minute and think, because the God who leads you is holy. Now look again at verse 7. The Lord spoke to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, so they will know that I will be with you just as I was with Moses. What does that tell us about God? He is the exalter of leaders. Over the next week, you're going to see this guy a lot on American TV commenting on the Super Bowl. For those who are not in the U.S., the Super Bowl is the culmination of the professional American football season. It is, for Americans, it's kind of like a combination of the World Cup and the Lunar New Year. Okay, that's what it's like for us. Okay, so who is this guy right here? What's his name? Anybody know? Tony Dungy, a former NFL head coach, led his team to a Super Bowl victory 15 years ago. He's now in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You may not know this. Years in the past, when Mr. Dungy was trying to get a head coaching job in the NFL, he was turned down by many owners. No, it wasn't his skin color that kept Tony Dungy back. It was his attitude. You see, Tony Dungy doesn't cuss. He doesn't demean his players. He doesn't use alcohol. He doesn't assert his authority in any way. Those of us who grew up playing football, he doesn't act anything like what we associate with a typical football coach. And that freaked out the ownership of most teams, even though he was obviously a talented guy. In fact, he said this in every interview he was in before he got a head coaching job, and the one he finally got with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He said this, I trust God. And he told these owners, I think your faith is more important than your job. Bosses don't like to hear that. He said, if you trust the Lord and work hard, he will put you in the right position. Close quote. Guess who would agree with that? Joshua. God tells Joshua, you concentrate on me. I'll take care of exalting you as a leader. You don't need to push. You don't need to scream or cuss to get the job done. Your faith is more important than your job. Trust me, and the leadership work will be accomplished. Of course, Tony Dungy did finally get hired as a head coach. And the day before that Super Bowl that his team won, Coach Dungy took out an advertisement in a national newspaper. Along with some help from crew, he paid for this advertisement in the USA Today and said this, a personal relationship with Jesus Christ is the only way I've found true peace, joy, and forgiveness. God is the exalter of leaders. Wise leaders recognize that and share it. Now, look at Joshua's speech in verse 10. He said, you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly dispossess before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. He is living. God is living. Get this. This is so cool. There's no article in the Hebrew. You know, sometimes it's really important to read things without the little adders that make it work in our language. It has a stronger meaning. This is who he is. He is living God. That's who he is. Now look at the peoples who are mentioned here. By the way, the Canaanites, they lived here in the coastal lands along here. The Amorites were up here. They weren't just in this area. They were all along the hill country. By the way, when you're reading your Old Testament, anytime you see Canaanite or Amorite and there's no other peoples mentioned, that's being used as a euphemism. Canaanite or Amorite will be used for all the peoples of the lands. If other peoples are listed, then it just means those particular people. The Jebusites actually weren't all over here, but I didn't have room to write it. They were concentrated in one little spot right here. They will later be called Jerusalem. Girgashites were down in the Negev. Perizzites were up here in the Megiddo Valley. Hivites were up in what will later be called Galilee. And the Hittites actually didn't have any presence. They had controlled this land long before, but their empire has retreated. But there are still a few people that call themselves Hittites, and they're actually very powerful, even though there's not a lot of Hittite people. Okay, now all these people groups that you just saw, they had gods. And their gods were shown with eyes and ears, but they couldn't really see. They couldn't hear. Their gods were false idols, while Israel's God is living. Do you see that? He is living God. When I worked at the camp in Germany, we tried to teach this concept to the kids. And so we had a little song, and they loved this song, that we would teach the kids to try and get this idea of living God. And it said, Gott ist nicht tot, ist das Leben. God is not dead. He is, roughly translated, this life. Okay? Gott ist nicht tot, ist das Leben. Gott ist nicht... Okay, all right. Right here, from Danny, from you that direction to all of you guys, say Gott ist nicht tot on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Gott ist nicht tot. Again, Gott ist nicht tot. Okay, from Denise, you guys, all the way over to you guys. Ist das Leben. Ist das Leben. 1, 2, 3. Ist das Leben. Again. Ist das Leben. Okay, now we're going to do it with the tune, and you guys answer them. Gott ist nicht tot. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Gott ist nicht tot. Ist das Leben. Gott ist nicht tot. Ist das Leben. Gott ist nicht tot. Ist das Leben. Lebt in meiner Hand. Pass auf. Lebt in meiner Fuß. Lebt in der Straße. Okay, yeah, that's good. All right. You got it, right? It's a wonderful way to remember this. He is not just alive. He is living God. And verse 10 also says he is the warrior for Israel. By the way, that's the headline on the right side of your notes. He's the warrior for Israel. God is going to drive out all these peoples. Now, don't misunderstand. As we talked about in chapter 1, this is a partnership. Israel's going to team with God in this process, and yet it is sovereign God who is the warrior for Israel. He will do the work that concerns Joshua and the people. Nonetheless, don't you think the Hebrews were likely intimidated by the odds here? Yeah, they're surely demoralized. None of these squatters has taken them up on their offer. Remember, Israel has given the offer as the covenant of Abraham commands. They have given the offer that all these people can join Israel as equals under Yahweh. And it's got to be defeating that no one has taken them up on that. In fact, we know from diplomatic letters that were discovered in Egypt, hundreds of them in fact, that a lot of scorn was being heaped on all of Israel's messengers that were going to these different people groups. Instead of recognizing the liberty that Israel was bringing, do you know what the elites of that day did? They called them names. They labeled them as oppressive. They said they were outlaws and slaves and untrustworthy. Now bring this home. I want you to raise your hand if you have ever been unfairly labeled, unjustly seen as an enemy when you were actually not. Raise your hand if you've ever been unfairly treated. Okay, hands down. Didn't you want to defend yourself? Didn't you want revenge? To go in with your guns blazing and set everything right? Now, I am not suggesting that we shouldn't stand up for truth. We should. But I am suggesting that Joshua chapter 3 tells me that I can rest in the Lord, even when I'm mislabeled or canceled. Yes, people will probably lie or gossip or misrepresent you. So then, to whom do you turn? Who is the warrior for his people? God. I have to remind myself of this all the time. You probably should too. Now, verse 13 has my favorite part. Look at verse 13. When the feet of the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of the whole earth, come to rest in the Jordan's water, its water will be cut off. The water flowing downstream will stand up in a mass. He is Lord of all the earth. God is triumphant over all. Truly, he's exactly what Rahab called him back in chapter 2. He is the Lord of heaven and earth. Look up here. This is the regional god, Baal. This is the oldest statue of him that I can find anywhere. This was in Jordan. That's Asherah next to him. Very, very old. This is probably, by the way, from the time of Abraham. Very old statue. In Middle Eastern mythology, Baal was the most powerful because he had triumphed over the sea god. Therefore, Baal was the power behind rain and flood and especially rivers. And the worship of Baal was grotesquely sexual. I don't even want to go into it because Baal was the god of floods and fertility. Remember, floods in this part of the world were a very important part of fertility. The floods were uncontrollable. They weren't measurably similar every year like in Egypt. They were wild, but they were important because the floods brought new silt. They brought new soil that allowed the depleted land to be used again. So, as we're going to see in a minute, Joshua chapter 3 occurs at flood stage. It is at the height of Baal's supposed uncontrollable, fertile power. Now, with that in mind, what is God about to do? He's about to show there is no Baal. God's going to stop even the river. There is no flood God can't control. Here, look at this one. This ancient Baal statue originally had, this one's not nearly as old. This is 2,000 years later. This one had lightning bolts in its hand originally to show that he had the power to cause storms and floods. But it's not real. God's priests are barely going to touch the water with their toes. And all of Baal's supposed power is going to stop. It just stops. That's the God we serve. He's Lord of everything. Even things that we fear are out of control are actually subject to his will. What looks unsurmountable to you? What do the false gods of this age point to as proof that your God doesn't exist, or that your God is powerless, or that you should be silenced? Look here, listen to this text. God is the Lord of all the earth. So we can be undaunted. And eventually, every person will see him display his lordship. Amen? All right, now let's see what we learned from the priests. Go to verse 14. Pick it up there. When the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carried the Ark of the Covenant ahead of the people. Now, the Jordan overflows its banks throughout the harvest season. There's actually a number of harvest seasons in Israel, but chapter 2 told us which one we're talking about. We'll get to it in a moment. But as soon as the priests carrying the ark reached the Jordan, their feet touched the water at its edge, and the water flowing downstream stood still, rising up in a mass that extended as far as Adam, a city next to Zarethan. The water flowing downstream into the Sea of Arabah, the Dead Sea, was completely cut off, and the people crossed opposite Jericho. What do we learn from the priests? Well, notice that they lead with the word of God. Some of you who studied Exodus may notice that this is not the normal arrangement. When God gave them their instructions how they were to travel through the wilderness during all their years as Bedouins, this is not how it happened. But this time, God says, put the ark right out in front of everybody. Why? I think it's to emphasize that the word of God is to be followed as a divine guide. Look at the ark. Keep it in sight. Follow the ark. It is the repository of God's law. Fairly regularly, I get asked by people, how can we find a really good church? Here's where to start. Find a place where they lead with the word of God. If the scriptures are central to what's going on, then that church will very likely end up in the right place. Do you catch how this whole text is building? I mean, up until now, we haven't known how God was going to accomplish this crossing. They've waited 3 days to see what's going to happen, and now they're told nothing's going to happen until the priests with the ark step into the flood. And these priests step up, the holy ark on their shoulders, and they get their feet wet without getting cold feet, as I put it in your notes. Remember back in chapter 2, we learned that the flax harvest had just occurred. That tells us the time of year. It's either late April or early May, because that's when the flax harvest takes place in Israel. Guess what else happens at that time of year? The Jordan River floods. The snows up on Mount Hermon melt in the suns. Those come down to the Sea of Galilee. It swells. It dispenses more water into the lower Jordan, going all the way down toward the Dead Sea. This picture, by the way, is when the Jordan was just beginning its crest. The last time I was there, it was churning. It was muddy. It was frankly pretty scary looking. And these priests bravely put their tootsies into that muddy mess. No cold feet. Just wet feet. By the way, those who don't know, cold feet is an old European expression that means to be scared of something, to get frightened at the last minute and to back away, to be ruled by fear. They are not ruled by fear. There's no cold feet here, just wet feet. Once a quarter, we give an award here at this church called Bold for the Fold. We use this to celebrate people who step out boldly in ministry, even when things look scary. Why do we make a big deal about that? Because it is critically important that people who follow the living God are willing to get their feet wet. Amen? Now, what can we learn from the people? Let's finish our text. Go to verse 17. The priests carrying the ark of the Lord's covenant stood firmly on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all Israel crossed on dry ground until the entire nation had finished crossing the Jordan. Okay, first thing we learn is they willingly head into danger. I want you to look at what's different about this miracle from what their previous generation experienced in the Red Sea. This time, they head toward danger. Remember, back at the Red Sea, the danger was behind them. Safety and opportunity lay ahead. I'm not trying to minimize in any way the bravery of that generation, but it has to be a little bit easier to move ahead when you've got Pharaoh's chariots and army behind you, right? Not so for this generation. Safety's behind them. They've already conquered the land here on the east side of the Jordan. They've got danger and opportunity ahead, and yet they move ahead. That is faithful. And by the way, if you think that's faithful, and it is, wait till you see what they do in chapter 5. Heading into danger is often required to fulfill God's calling. It's especially necessary to experience the miracles that have been prepared by the Lord of all the earth. About 1,400 years after this miracle, Peter, follower of Jesus, did what his forebears had done. He crossed water. He stepped out of the boat. He's the only one to have the bravery to step out of the boat and move out. Why did he do that? To emphasize, to show his identity, to live out who he really is, a follower of Jesus. Look up here at this medieval painting. I love this one. Peter walks to Jesus by Henri de Blanc. 1550, he made this painting. Now de Blanc doesn't think, please don't misunderstand, he doesn't think Jesus was standing on dry ground. He did it that way on purpose. He's trying to show a parallel between what Peter did and what happened in Joshua, right? There is a connection here. Peter steps out trusting God's word, and it's like dry ground. The Israelites step out, and it is dry ground. Yes, I know. Peter is very soon after this going to sink down because he takes his eyes off of the Lord and sees the wind and the waves. And yes, Israel is also going to sink down in the days to come. But at this point, it's significant that they willingly head out toward danger. Secondly, in obediently trusting God and crossing the Jordan, the people gain a deeper identity, especially their identity with their loving Father. This is emphasized in a psalm written sometime later, commenting on this and other events of Israeli history. Psalm 114, when Israel came out of Egypt, the house of Jacob from a people who spoke a foreign language, Judah became his sanctuary. Israel, his what, everybody? His dominion. The sea looked and fled, and now we get to our passage, the Jordan turned back. They're God's dominion. Look at the names. They are his sanctuary, his dwelling place. They've got new names. They have a new identity. Their baptism shows this. That's what miracles can do for people. They display true new identities. Israel now has a new name. They're God's dominion. They have an ever deeper relationship with the Father who loves them and provides for them, who tabernacles, who sanctuaries with them. God provided a special treat for us today, a very powerful example of this in the Christian baptisms that we saw earlier. Our brethren use that water to illustrate their identity and a connection to their loving Father. That's what Israel's like in Joshua 3. They're celebrating their identity with their loving Father. The same's true for everyone who trusts in Jesus as Savior. Romans chapter 8. Look at verses 15 and 16. Why don't you join me on the underlined text here? Romans 8. For you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear. Instead, you received a spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. Abba is Aramaic for daddy. The Spirit himself testifies together with our spirit that we are God's children. Amen. That's what we learned from Israel at the Jordan. Finally, look at what we learned from the environment. Go back to verse 16. And the water flowing downstream stood still, rising up in a mass that extended as far as Adam, a city next to Zaretan. The water flowing downstream into the Sea of Arabah, the Dead Sea, was completely cut off, and the people crossed opposite Jericho. What do we learn from the environment? The river obeys Yahweh. It stops. Now, historians like to point out that the Jordan River lies along the Great Rift Valley, which is a hotbed of seismic activity. History also shows that 6 times in recorded history, just that we know about, the Jordan River has been cut off because of a landslide produced by earthquakes. Earthquakes stopped the Jordan River in 1160, 1267. These are just the time periods that we have record of. 1546, 1834, 1906, and 1927. Here's a photo of that 1927 one. That one was remarkable. There was a 150-foot high embankment of the Jordan that collapsed in an earthquake, and the Jordan River was blocked for 21 hours. The water flooded 16 miles up all the way in this whole area. Those of you that have been to Beit Shan was underwater. It was a remarkable flood. But there's more here in Joshua 3 than just a God-ordained seismic shift. Think about this. The ground they walked through was what? Dry. Seismic activity does not account for immediately dry ground. Oh, there may have indeed have been an earthquake in the Great Rift. It's very likely. But this is an even bigger miracle than that. Not just the river bed obeys God. The ground is dry. This is a miracle. Trying to explain it away is just silly. The entire earth is in God's control. That's why Joshua calls him the Lord of all the earth. It's even repeated for us to make sure we don't miss this. So look at the next part of Psalm 114. Psalm 114 is that great song we read from earlier. The next part says this. Why was it, sea, that you fled? Jordan, that you turned back? Mountains that you skipped like rams, hills like lambs? So there may have been an earthquake. Tremble, earth, at the presence of the Lord, at the presence of the God of Jacob. The psalmist is almost mocking the elements here because the entire earth is in God's control. It doesn't matter what we think is happening on the planet. And there certainly is a lot of mass hysteria about the environment today. God is in control. He is over everything. That's what we learn from the land and the weather and the water in Joshua chapter 3. Okay, let's wrap up. Let's apply this to our lives. Let's wrap up with a word about the baptism motif in our own lives. Look at the lovely prose by Dr. Ironside there in your notes. Harry Ironside said, as we realize our identification with him in that death he died in our stead, talking about Jesus, we enter into the life of joy and high privilege, which is the happy portion of all who believe. Israel did nothing to merit this deliverance. It was God who wrought in grace on their behalf. So in the work of the cross, all has been done that needed to be done in order that sinners might be saved. Christ himself is the ark, and he went down into death that a way might be opened for us to enter the blessing of redemption. It is ours to believe God and so receive the effect of Christ's work. Close quote. As Christians, we are baptized into the resurrected life of Jesus. That is our identity. By faith, we are changed. We're in Jesus when he passes through death into life. Herman Melville very famously depicted this in his great novel, Moby Dick. Okay? After the wreck of the Pequod, the protagonist survives. He's the only one who survives. He survives by passing through water, right? Anybody know what he used to stay alive, to pass through the water? You may know what he held on to? a casket. Yeah. Okay, a little heavy-handed, but still a really beautiful metaphor, right? He's showing, Melville, steeped in the Scripture, is showing that there is a bold statement to be understood about the baptism motif in our lives. He's illustrating what we read in 1 Peter. Remember 1 Peter chapter 3. God patiently waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared. In it, a few, that is 8 people, were saved through water. Baptism, which corresponds to this, now saves you. Not as the removal of dirt from the body, but the pledge of a good conscience toward God through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Resurrection implies death. There's a casket, and you raise from the dead. If you believe in Jesus, you are baptized through this world. You pass through this world of water in Him. You are identified with Jesus. That means if you trust Jesus' death on the cross and His resurrection for you, then you're actually baptized into His death and you are raised in His eternal life. That's why we're called Christians. It's our identity. We bear His name because we are identified with Christ. Amen? Let's pray about that. Father, I want to pray for all those who need to believe. Anyone who's studying with me who needs to receive the gift of God in Jesus, who died on the cross and rose from the dead so that everyone who believes in Him might be saved. If you have never believed in Jesus, He is the only way of salvation. The water's too cold. Your hands are too slippery. You cannot, however hard you try, you cannot pass through the water. Or as Alexander Pope put it in a powerful poem a couple hundred years ago, you cannot cross the bar. But God made a way that by trusting in God the Son, you could be crucified with Him who died on that Roman cross to pay for sin. And you could no longer live, but you live in Christ. And He lives in you. And you follow Him into resurrection life forever. And it's all by faith. I know that's not what people like. We want some formula. We want to earn it. We want pagan little gods. But that's not the truth. God makes a way, and you trust Him. If you've never done so, trust Jesus right now as your Savior. If you just trusted Jesus, who is the Lord of all the earth, as your Savior, raise your hand. Everybody else is still praying. Raise your hand, please. Good for you. If you're with us elsewhere, please let your host know. We want to rejoice with you. Now, Lord, I pray for all of us who know Jesus, who are believers in Christ, but are not actively trusting God. We may have head agreement with all these wonderful traits about you that we saw in this text, but we're not actively trusting you. We're scared. We're scared for ourselves. We're scared for our brethren. We act out of fear, and we're sorry. Help us follow your word and step out in trust every day. In Jesus' name, amen.